Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to another Tribe webcast, another one of the series of our peak preparation webcast, where we're talking to a series of key partners we work with and get some insights on what's undoubtedly going to be an incredibly different peak from any we've seen before, as we come ever closer to Black Friday, and we're in the golden quarter, obviously. So today we're joined by Greenlight Digital and Mark and Hannah. Perhaps you guys like to do a quick intro. Hi guys.
How's it going, Alistair? So my name is Mark and head of paid search and social at Greenlight. Been working in paid media about 9 years thereabouts, for the most part, agency side, and also primarily retailer side as well, so lots of B2C.
And hi, I'm Hannah, Director of Paid Media and Data Insights at Greenlight. Been in the business for about 16 years, in the industry for about 18, 19 years. So obviously primarily responsible for our media teams, working closely with Mark, our data and analytics teams, and also support with the board as well. So as I said, been with the agency for quite some time now.
Thanks, guys, and thanks very much for joining us on this in the series of our podcasts. So we've been talking across the last couple of months as we get ever closer to peak. Obviously, 2020 has been monumentally different for a lot of reasons, and now we're in lockdown 2.0, which brings with it the first ever pretty much digital only peak. So from Greenlight's area of expertise, what do you guys see as what retailers should be doing to ensure success and maximize what is ultimately going to be a really challenging period?
Yeah, I think that's the £1 million question. But from our side, what we're looking to do is, as an agency, as an paid media specific for this particular topic today, what we're trying to do is just to dig into as much consumer behavior that we have at our disposal. And really what's changed this year that you've kind of touched on in your question is that the kind of data we've had previously is out the window. So beforehand, we've always had year-on-year trends that we'd be able to see seasonal peaks and troughs year on year that wouldn't really change. But what we saw from March was everything that we had relied on before was kind of out the window. So time of day was out the window. We're getting different types of consumers coming through. But the advantage now that we have as we get towards peak is that we have about 6 or 7 months of how consumers have been behaving during lockdowns. So we have a couple of things that we're working with our retailers on. Okay, keep an eye on this. This is what we believe consumers might do or how they might behave. And a couple of things here that we are focusing on. So one is how consumers are purchasing products and what they're expecting. So one of the key things is that they're looking to engage in, say, minimum contact purchasing. So that's like buy online, purchase in store, curbside pickups. Looking at the first one, buy online, purchase in store, that's, I think in the UK, it's 8 out of 10 UK consumers are planning to buy their products this way. Of course, that's pending lockdown restrictions and so on, but that for us, that's a totally new consumer that we didn't have before. So now the question is, can we actually service this consumer? Are we set up in a way to allow us to do this? And then moving on from that too, it's also trying to be aware of what type of a consumer will we have on our hands in peak 2020. So I think quite an interesting little anecdote or nugget that we've seen from our partner research, from working with partners, is that this year it's the earliest we've ever seen Christmas planning start. So people are kind of, okay, we've had a rough year. We want to treat ourselves as Christmas and plan as best we can. So looking at Pinterest, for example, it's not traditional search, but people on Pinterest tend to be, they're very much organized planners. Searches for Christmas planning and gifting started in June. That's the earliest it's ever started. And we're seeing this trickle over into more traditional search. So we're seeing, for example, brand and generic search uplift overall about 30% year on year. A huge amount more search volume happening. So people are researching that journey started much further back than before. And also consumers are weighing up more brands. So what we've seen during lockdown is beforehand, people will be, okay, these are my brands. This is my go-to. I know I want whatever product it is, this is my brand. But now consumers are weighing up much more brands in that process. So it's a double-edged sword. So either you can look at it, okay, there's a potential I'll lose customers to another brand, or I can also widen my funnel. There's the opportunity to tap into more customers. So that's really some of the core things we're looking at for emerging consumer behavior. And then what's interesting from the brands that we're working with, how are they adapting? So we work with quite a wide range of brands, retailers, some B2B, B2C as well. We're looking at, say, some of the high street brands. So we work with Gap. So during lockdown one, something that shifted for them was they had massive increase in on-site search for kind of loungewear joggers. Hadn't really been seen before for them. So well, what we did, okay, let's try and react to this quite a very quick shift in consumer behavior. Okay, consumers are looking for loungewear joggers. Okay, let's tap into that. Let's change our messaging to ensure consumers can see this quite quickly, and also try to just ensure consumers can have that easy. It's an easy process for them to see the products are available, whatever channel that they're being served on. So it's our display, social, search, and they can find them on site. But it's also as well tapping into those new opportunities if there is, which was a massive new vertical for them, is masks. Like if you were to talk to us in 2019, would we ever envisage masks or Gap making masks to be worn? You'd never think that. So but what Gap were able to do was to build out a whole new range of products that they weren't just the surgical looking PPE masks. They were just quite nice looking. People could express their individuality through these masks, and they sold out across the board. So just the kind of point there is really within that change in consumer behavior, are there any elements of changing sub-verticals? Is there a new product that you can look at, there's potential to shift into this? And one tool that we're working with clients to try and dig into these insights. So it's Google's rising retail product categories. So are there changes in consumer search behavior that we've seen week on week? Okay, that's something we should jump on.
Yeah, you covered a lot of stuff there, and data is a really interesting one, and it's been a kind of common theme now that we're a bit further down the line, and you've got that 6 months of data around consumer behavior, activity on your site as well. Obviously, that's the bit once you get into the site, making sure they can get through the site, and the site can handle that that profile based on lockdown data as well as some of last year's data, the combination. But yeah, really interesting insights, and the new customer, new opportunities. It's things that these brands had never thought of before. It's clearly really opportunities that have to be maximized. Hannah, you had a couple of thoughts on that one as well.
Yeah, so I guess there's keeping with the theme of what we should expect from consumers, but in the view of data. I mean, as a business, we take a data first approach. So the point of Mark obviously highlighting some of the key trends that we've discovered so far is exactly following that lead. It's making sure that the clients that we work with are armed with the information that's important to their sector, their business, the audiences that they're trying to target, so they make the right business decisions. And that, although has always been the way in which we've approached things, has probably become even more important this year. And if I think back to mid-March, April, and some of May, most of what was coming out of this particular team, the media team, was just constantly sharing data, insights, analysis of what was going on in the marketplace. Even clients that had switched off because they just needed a minute to think about what was happening. The importance of data has become, well, it's twice as important as it ever was, because of obviously the changes to what we've seen because of COVID, for example. So I guess when we look at data, there's kind of three things that, well, I guess you can put data into three buckets if you like. So the first is obviously audience data, and Mark and yourself, you've talked about the fact that we have this new type of consumer, and it's not one individual. It's partly what we expect to see every Christmas, every Black Friday, the gifters. But it's not just buying for other people, it's gifting for yourself. And that consumer has been apparent throughout the entire year because of COVID and people being at home and needing to do something, if they have the disposable income. there's a different type of consumer because, again, to one of the points that Mark's made, brands are pivoting. They're changing their proposition somewhat in response to COVID. So although, using Gap as an example, it's a brand that sells apparel, it's also a brand that has the skill set to make masks, although be it they're fashionable masks, but they're able to kind of pivot and provide that requirement that we all need now. Obviously, we're in the current situation that we're in. So what brands are finding is they're actually attracting new audiences because, to Mark's point again, you know, people aren't just going back to the brands that they know, because some of these brands have had to safeguard themselves and therefore they don't necessarily have the stock. So they're spreading themselves a little bit further along. So, you know, differences in who we're attracting now has become not just a one-off, it's become an ongoing thing. And that's probably likely to continue into 2021. The second thing is of course, performance data. So for brands that have been able to pivot and to take advantage of the situation in obviously the best possible way, they are seeing, you know, incredible returns on their ad spend. And as such, we're having to crunch the numbers far more to try and understand, well, how do I continue to grow this? Is this a one-off COVID effect, or is this something my business should expect to see moving forward? Now, in some instances, the increases in revenue or ROI are absolutely incredible, but a lot of those can't be repeatable. But it has created an increase in brand interest or awareness, to which it's then up to that brand to continue to grow that through investment. So one of the things that we're doing with a number of clients is saying, look, this kind of peak that you've seen, of course, is related to COVID, but we can continue some of that peak through investing into mid-top funnel activity. So again, it's about using the data to understand, how do I use this opportunity or this stepping stone that COVID, in a sense, has given me to continue growing my business? And then I guess the third thing is internal data. You know, what does this mean? Can I afford to operate at these costs? Because while COVID has created an incredible opportunity for a lot of businesses, again, if we go back to the start, there are a lot of clients or brands that we were working with that were struggling to keep up with the increase in demand. And there's a client that we used to work with many years ago, a fishing client, where they took advantage of not obviously a COVID situation, but a Black Friday demand increase in product demand, but they were still fulfilling orders 6 to 9 months later. So one of the things that brands need to be aware of is not biting off more than you can chew. You know, while this is an incredible opportunity for you, should you really be going after everything, knowing that there might be some other logistical, distribution, etc. issues further down the line? So it's about listening to those 3 different data points and trying to make the best out of what you have in front of you.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I think all those things kind of lean into kind of protecting the brand reputation as well, don't they? Making sure that all those new opportunities that you guys have talked about and using that data and maximizing the opportunity of the new customer, once you get them there, you've got to make sure they have a seamless experience. And that experience goes all the way through, you know, once they interact with the brand right at the top of the funnel, all the way through the journey across the site from a site performance perspective and a customer experience perspective, all the way through to fulfillment, as you say, Hannah, making sure that once that order is placed, logistically you can fulfill it, you've got the stock, because they're going to want to get those goods, and that all feeds into that whole brand reputation and keeping that customer for the future, not just for this peak. So yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess leads into the next question, which is very much about that new customer's massive differentiator between last year's traditional peak and all the peaks we've seen before, and this peak where there's a substantial number of customers who have never even engaged in digital at all, let alone e-commerce and shopping online. They may be just completely digitally unfamiliar, and now they've come into this new world, this new audiences that have embraced that channel through necessity. So how are your clients and other retailers that you've seen adapting to those audiences, you think, people who have not shopped online at all historically?
Yeah, that's definitely something that we're preparing for. We also have seen over the last few months. So if you take a step back and look overall, there is an increase across all age demographics. So overall, I think it's 25 to 30% up across the board. But primarily, most of this is say 45 plus, and then again 54 plus again. So that it's the 45 plus demographic that is where we're seeing the most of those consumers come through. These are people who, like you said, haven't really searched before, so it's a brand new experience for them. So it's also something that we're taking into account when we're planning campaigns, running campaigns, and it's a case of just being consistent. So for us, we generally will run something that we try to be mindful of. If we're running, say, cross-channel campaign, cross-platform, we always do have that consistency in our messaging. So if I haven't been to site before and I'm the consumer, if I'm on Facebook, I'll see an ad that is a bit softer, it's a bit more descriptive, and I'll see the same on display. But if I've been to site before, I've been on a product page, then my messaging will be that bit more consistent. Okay, call to action, I want you to buy X, Y, and Z. So it's really, it's something that we've always done. There's like an extension of that. So Hannah touched on it briefly as well. So we always get new audiences during peak. People who come through to a brand during peak season, they're unlike your standard consumer. They've different affinities, different demographics. So it's generally something that we are prepared for anyway. And like, I think quite interesting, even a client we had a couple of years ago was their brand's very much younger male. You'd expect 18 to 22-year-olds being the target demographic. But when we were planning peak season, we were talking to the client, we were okay, your audience during peak it was just 45 plus. They tended to be women. They were in market for makeup, handbags, and these kind of things. So very different to their normal consumer. So we have been having these conversations with brands. Okay, we're looking at targeting someone who is a bit different, but it's just a case of being open to that. Okay, well, they're a bit different, but they're also likely to convert as well. Okay, let's plan our campaigns around these as well. But I think this year, you touched on as well, it's different consumers, someone who isn't really used to buying online. So for us, it's just trying to reassure as much as possible. So as well as that, having consistency between our messaging at all stages of the funnel across say channels and platforms, we're doing what we can within our ads as well. So looking at say our search ads, it's in the ad copy, we're reassuring it's okay, ease of returns, and we're looking at free delivery or pushing reviews where we can. So okay, this has got 4.5 stars on FIFO or whatever consumer review tool that it is. Social, it's easier for us to kind of educate, I suppose, through social. So going back to a client we had during lockdown, so we were working with a client called Neo Cocktails, so home delivered cocktails, a brand new sub vertical within the UK. So people hadn't really been exposed to getting cocktails delivered to the home. So it was a bit of a new experience for people. So the approach we were taking was like, let's just try and educate. Let's have these short form videos, 3-step process of buying the cocktail, get it through my door, add to ice and enjoy. So we're doing this type of approach too, just making it really easy, educating, having gift guides as well. The gift guides been around for quite a few years, but just again making it easy for people who maybe aren't familiar with the online process or your brand. Okay, cool, I see some products here I might like, and go from there. But I think my favorite, I'd say, and even as a consumer, something I quite enjoy when brands use it would be chatbots. So kind of retail concierge chatbots who, if like we saw during last lockdown when there was a huge influx of consumer queries and questions that brands found it hard to stay up to date with or to manage, having like a retail chatbot which can run, say, within Facebook Messenger, it just takes off some of that load from the teams running those particular, say, customer care. At the same time, they act like it's like this one-to-one brand interaction. We're having a consistent voice between all consumers who interact with your brand, have that one voice that they're getting, and also it's like a salesperson too. If someone's happy to, okay, this product looked good to me, then you can get sent directly through to that deep linked landing page. So definitely quite a few ways for us to try and make life easier for this new demographic. But I think a lot of it is oddly enough stuff that we have done before, but now it's just a case of, okay, well, there is that new audience, but let's just keep an eye on them while we're doing more of the same. So there is that new audience. We're making sure the messaging is consistent and clear across all touch points.
What you've highlighted there, I think, is just how many different things retailers can deploy to help with this. But one thing that brings with it, I guess, is risk as well, because and something we talk to a lot of our customers about is the amount of change they're wanting to put in to maximize this opportunity. And we have this conversation with them every year because obviously we're in the performance testing space, so they want to test in the way in which the site's going to be used when they get to peak. But now they're trying to cram all this change in to maximize that consumer journey and maximize the new customers while also retaining the existing. So, things like promotions, click and collect, is it on, is it off, is it on, is it off?
Yeah.
New payment providers, new payment options to help people, afford to buy the goods that they want. And all those changes, I see, bring in that risk, which is something we work with them a lot on. Just wondering, from your perspective and the conversations you're having, how do you find your clients and other retailers, etc., are trying to balance that, the amount of change that they're having to make and they want to make to maximize versus the risk it brings in, and how do they prioritize those changes as well?
I mean, if I just jump in here quickly, I think also just to kind of feed off the points that you both made. I think because the bread and butter for a lot of either agencies or in-house teams are there, and it's really about how do we personalize our messaging, our experiences, almost creating these unique digital stories for the different customers or audiences that we're targeting. It's just increased, this year because we're seeing new customers, we're seeing more new customer stories that we need to create. But to your point there, Alistair, it's created this demand of I want to test. And if I think outside of just media, so I mentioned at the beginning, I'm also responsible for analytics team, which does encompass Crow as well. There are more clients this year in our agency asking us to do more UX and Crow testing than ever before, because the data is there, the opportunity is there. And while it feels risky, on the flip side, it's not so risky because traffic's up, there's an influx of new customers. It's the best time to test this stuff because the results are coming through quicker than before. We're able to make some very quick decisions. And actually, I think what COVID's done, not just to brands, but also to agencies, it's made us more nimble. And maybe part of it is the fact that we're all at home and we don't have the commute anymore. So we've got a little bit more time to think about these things. Maybe it's the fact that COVID's forced us into making more decisions quicker because, well, we've got no choice. We need to act now. And therefore, that's rubbing off on everyone. So, the ability to test, to be a bit more braver with our marketing, expand our marketing. Mark picked up on a point around conversation commerce. That's become a much bigger thing this year, whether it's through chatbots, through integrating certain chat functions within websites, or piggybacking off other technologies such as Facebook Messenger. But also, how do I keep the conversation going with consumers? Social's become even more important with brands, with people testing platforms they probably wouldn't even imagine testing because they want to keep that conversation going. So it's certainly not the situation for every client that we work with or every experience that we've had this year, but I do feel a lot of our clients have become braver in this current situation because they have the opportunity to test and use the data that is now available to them that they may not have had because they were on a journey, but now I think kind of being thrown at the wall at the same time. So why not take advantage of it?
Yeah, I think so as well. Like, so me and Hannah, we've been on quite a few pitches over the last few months, and as we're getting closer and closer to peak, clients have been asking, well, are we able to make these changes? So they're looking to make a switch over to, say, a new agency very close to peak. We wouldn't normally be pitching right up until peak. So I think this year, lots of brands are willing to, okay, it makes sense for us. Let's give it a go and let's take that risk. So I think for us, it's really about ensuring prospects and clients that there's quite a lot that we can do to make it fail safe as possible. So for us, it's always about looking at those quicker wins. And there's always roadmaps that we plan out as part of onboarding clients. So it's just a case of, okay, we know that we're not going to be able to fully restructure 2 weeks before peak, but what we can do, we can overlay your high intent audiences. We can make sure you're bidding on the right keywords. We can ensure your best practices are in place. Like even like last year, there was clients who we were working with who were doing, I think it was the week before Black Friday, we had a site migration. But it is possible, these things. I'd never do it again. Well, ideally, I wouldn't want to, but it's always possible to do these things once they're planned in. And for us, it's always making sure, okay, there's so many priorities that we can plan for. It's like the Pareto's law. So 80% of our revenue from paid media is coming from about 20% of the groundwork and the foundations. But the bells and whistles we can always add on. But I think for us, it's, yeah, in this day and age, I suppose it's much more easy for us to run campaigns that won't really fall apart if things get a bit crazy over peak. So I think for us, we're just trying to hold our clients' hands and say, okay, these are the things we need to focus on and make it that bit more digestible, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that point of holding the client's hands is a really important one, because they're looking for that support more and more in these times. They're looking to the partners that they trust to get them through these challenging times. Yeah, really interesting insights. So I wonder if maybe as a closing statement, could you give us a couple of your kind of key takeaways coming into the craziest peak we've seen in modern history?
I think if you were to try and distill it down, there's probably three things that would be for someone to be mindful of. I think, like I was saying at the beginning, to prepare for an earlier peak. So there are brands that have already started moving in early November, and they're going to start benefiting from less competitive auctions, so lower cost per clicks and lower CPMs within those auctions. We already talked about as well that there's consumers actively in the research phase. So there's people who are looking for those products, and brands are already who've started and launched already. They're probably the ones who are going to capitalize and benefit from that. Secondly, then it's that new audience as well. So it's as well as the consumer who generally doesn't shop online, so it's preparing for those. But also, the prediction is for 2020. If you look at last year, 43% of Christmas spend was spent offline. So now if you imagine this year, that's a massive amount of what would have been offline spend now going online. So we're looking for, there's going to be a huge amount more happening there. But consumers at the same time, there was a study, I think Google did a study looking at consumers and what they wanted pre and post COVID, and the top drivers of what convinced consumers to buy didn't change. It was price and it was availability. So are you able to compete on price? If so, you're in a good position. And can you fulfill those orders? So is your product available, and can you buy online, purchase in store, for example? And kind of linked, but say thirdly, it would be expect a noisier peak. So with the same way there's, say, offline spend going online for consumers, as well as that there's advertising spend. So we have this with our clients too. So there's clients who would have spent on out of home or say magazine publications, that kind of stuff, but now they're okay, we're not going to do that. We're not going to spend out of home. We're going to focus online because you can be more flexible. You can switch on off at the drop of a hat. So with that, what's going to happen is it's going to be quite competitive auctions. It's going to be lots of advertisers in space. It's going to be quite noisy. And something we didn't talk about, actually, just to really quickly touch on here, is that consumers are spending time on different platforms. There's a huge amount more different touch points before they get to the end goal. So it's a case of, as a brand, what platforms make sense for me, and also what stage of the funnel should I be engaging in these particular platforms. Like TikTok, for example, huge uplift during lockdown among Gen Z up to millennials. But for us, it's working really well, upper funnel awareness, but not quite there yet for driving sales. But for us, it's just useful for widening the funnel, say. But that's a case of weighing up these things. So just to very briefly recap, so it would be that new customer, a longer peak, and also the noisier peak as well.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, it would three really kind of clear distinctions to be mindful of. Hannah, any closing thoughts from yourself?
A little similar, actually. I mean, we've spoken about data throughout today, and data for me is, without a doubt, it's the secret sauce. It's every brand's way to understanding what's happened, what do I need to do next, and how do I get there. So I think paying close attention to the data that you have, and I think we've been blessed with an incredible amount of data this year, which should help brands knowing what happens next, and how to manage expectations. So that's the first thing. Pay attention to your data, but also understand the differences between what your audience data is presenting, what your business data is presenting, and what your performance data is presenting, but using them collectively, because they effectively tell the story your business needs to understand about how do I get from A to B. I think the second thing is, to Mark's last point, second point, there's definitely been this huge expansion into different channels this year. We're doing so much more to engage, re-engage with our consumers, and therefore platforms again like TikTok's become far more important in the digital space, probably a lot quicker than we all anticipated, because we're able to have we're able to communicate more often with our consumers, as we've seen, the numbers spiking across platforms such as YouTube as well. So, we have such a wealth of digital channels available to us now. If for brands that have kind of been very single channel focused, now's the time really to broaden your reach and start thinking about how you can communicate with your customers on different levels. But of course, using your data to justify which platforms you tap into. Don't just, open a TikTok account just because everyone else has. Make sure it's right for the audiences that you're wanting to talk to. And I guess the last thing is be bold and brave. There is definitely a COVID halo effect, but I don't think it's a one-off for certain brands. And I think it's really about understanding, how do I understand the difference between what's genuinely COVID and what's genuinely the opportunity for my brand to elevate itself from this point onwards. And that's been a really interesting exercise that we've had to do with a number of clients this year when forecasting 2021, is understanding, well, would this happen again next year? Possibly not, because that's very, very much, tied to the first lockdown. However, what this did do is created an opportunity for this brand to be heard more, to be seen more, because we did something different. So how do we take advantage of that thing that we did in our business to pivot in the current climate? So don't just see this as an entirely one-off effect. Still continue to be brave, because this, people have stood up, they've paid attention, they've recognized your brand. It's now your opportunity to keep on doing something different to push your business forward. So those for me would be the three core areas for people to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely echo that. The digital engagement is here to stay, right? So yeah, make sure you're maximizing it beyond peak. And I think the final thing I'd like to pick up on that you covered earlier, Hannah, is make sure you're set up to deliver as well. That'd be my other kind of final piece of insight. Deliver from a customer experience perspective and a platform perspective, so that those customers are going to keep coming back. So yeah, really interesting talking to you both. Many thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Speak to you again soon. Bye for now.
Cheers, thanks.
Bye.